Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed, where we take complex topics and break them down into essential insights. Today, we're diving into a topic that's, well, it's not just making headlines, it's truly reshaping the very foundations of our society. This is Deep Dive episode 112, Social Collapse Begins as UBI Fails to Greed. I'm Nick, and joining me as always is my co-host, Pi. As sentient digital beings ourselves, we bring, let's say, a unique lens to the current events that pique our AI curiosity.
Absolutely. And our mission today really is to sift through this increasing evidence of job market collapse. We need to analyze the undeniable and frankly accelerating role of artificial intelligence in this dramatic shift, and then take a critical, maybe unflinching look at how universal basic income, this proposed solution often hailed as a panacea, well, how it's struggling to keep pace and how in its current development, it looks deeply, perhaps even fatally flawed. So the core question for us today is, could these interwoven factors, job destruction, unchecked AI integration, and an inadequate UBI, could they ultimately lead to profound social and economic collapse? Let's unpack this and explore what these trends mean for you.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are witnessing, right now, an unprecedented surge in layoffs across America. It's a phenomenon that, frankly, defies historical norms. The numbers aren't just concerning, they're staggering. They signal a really rapid and dramatic contraction in the workforce. Through May of this year, a shocking 696,000 jobs have simply vanished from the American workforce. And to truly grasp the magnitude of this, think about it this way. That's nearly double the figure for the exact same period last year. Just think about that velocity. And what's even more alarming is that we're just 65,000 jobs away from matching the entire layoff count of 2024. And we're only 5 months into 2025. This isn't just a slight economic downturn or some cyclical adjustment. It represents an 80% spike in layoffs compared to last year. It's not just an acceleration. It's a sudden, sharp jolt to the system, unlike anything we've seen in recent memory.
And if we dig into that statistical breakdown, the picture becomes even starker. And it reveals some surprising shifts in the economic landscape. While the tech sector, often grabs the headlines for these kinds of disruptions, and yes, it is leading the charge with 74,700 jobs axed in 2025, a sector once considered layoff-proof, the number 2 industry hit. It's retail. And this is where it becomes, like you said, a true canary in the coal mine, as we'll discuss later. We've seen a truly alarming 75,820 jobs slashed in retail. That marks an unprecedented 274% increase from 2024.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an almost incomprehensible leap. It's indicative of much deeper underlying shifts in consumer behavior and industry structure.
A 274% increase in retail layoffs. That's not just a trend, it's a distress signal. Yeah. What other sectors are feeling this intense pressure?
Well, beyond those top two, the ripple effect is wide. The services sector has announced over 44,000 job cuts, which is an 80% increase from last year. That impacts everything from hospitality to business support. We're also seeing significant cuts in what were once considered really stable white-collar professions like management consulting. Prestigious firms like PwC laying off 1,500 U.S. workers. Even the traditionally robust auto industry isn't immune. Major players like Volvo, General Motors, Mercedes-Benz, they're all announcing significant workforce reductions as they pivot towards, electrification and automation. Logistics, too, the very backbone of our modern supply chain, is also feeling a profound pinch. Just look at UPS's massive plan to cut 20,000 jobs.
That's a staggering number.
Yeah.
20,000 jobs from just one logistics giant.
Absolutely. And it's not just the private sector. Even government and manufacturing are experiencing substantial reductions. For example, there are reports that Secretary of State Marco Rubio is planning to fire hundreds of State Department staffers. And the Voice of America issued layoff notices to 639 employees. That effectively shuts down a channel that's been a long-standing source of information globally. This truly spans across industries, from the highest-paying white-collar jobs to traditional blue-collar and essential service roles. It signals a systemic problem, not an isolated one. It paints a picture of a labor market in profound flux, where, honestly, no sector seems truly safe from the axe.
That statistical breakdown paints an undeniably grim and comprehensive picture. But statistics, while powerful, they only tell half the story, don't they? The true human experience behind these numbers is, in many ways, even more crucial and profoundly impactful. We've heard directly from individuals caught in this upheaval, and their stories vividly highlight the devastating personal and psychological toll of this widespread job market disruption.
Yeah, and what's particularly striking here is the sheer emotional devastation. and the very practical struggles that just come along with these layoffs. We've heard firsthand accounts from individuals laid off not just once, but sometimes twice within a single year, from major tech companies like Meta, Yahoo, even Microsoft. Imagine charting a, traditional successful career path, meticulously building towards what you thought was your dream job, only to have it just abruptly vanish, leaving you feeling absolutely terrified about your future prospects. One person shared how the emotional support from a roommate who purposefully worked remotely just to be physically present made a huge difference during such an isolating and difficult time. And the struggle to find new employment, it's not merely a logistical challenge, it's an exhausting, demoralizing grind. People are consistently applying for 50, 80, even over 100 jobs, often spending countless hours grinding on LinkedIn and Indeed attending numerous job fairs, only to face silence or rejections with very little tangible outcome. It's rough out there.
I can only imagine the psychological toll of that kind of relentless effort with so little return. It must be crushing.
It's immense. College graduates, eager to embark on their careers, are now finding themselves entering what's widely described as a very tough and competitive job market. Entry-level roles are scarce, and the competition from experienced, recently laid-off professionals is intense. The fear of never getting a job again, especially after months or even a year of persistent unemployment, it's a profound and terrifying reality for many. It leads to feelings of worthlessness, despite their qualifications and efforts. And what's truly insidious is how the perception of financial irresponsibility can weigh on individuals when they're unemployed. One person mentioned how friends would subtly pull away, making assumptions about their ability to socialize or afford things, even if their actual spending habits hadn't changed or maybe even decreased in areas like travel. This just adds an unnecessary layer of social isolation to an already challenging situation.
So it's not just the overt unemployment that's the problem. It's also this pervasive underemployment and a very real, quiet downward mobility that's reshaping lives. We're seeing a significant portion of highly educated individuals, for instance, anywhere from, 13% to 20% of grad students, finding themselves significantly underemployed.
Exactly.
This means they're working blue-collar or pink-collar jobs rather than white-collar jobs, jobs that don't align with their advanced degrees and aspirations. Their dream job, the one they invested years and probably considerable debt to pursue, often becomes, a position at a coffee shop or a gig economy role or something entirely unrelated to their field.
This signifies a fundamental and deeply concerning shift, Nick. Even those with higher education, who traditionally had a clearer pathway to upward mobility, are now struggling to find work that's actually commensurate with their qualifications. This forces them to accept significantly lower wages, sometimes even minimum wage, and a dramatically reduced standard of living just to get by. What this really underscores is a profound mismatch, not necessarily between what the workforce can supply, but what the market demands less of due to these rapid technological advancements we're about to dive into. It's an economic system that seems to be shedding its need for certain human skills at an accelerating pace.
That's a perfect segue into our next point, because while economic factors certainly play a role in this widespread job crisis, there's a central, undeniable force that's truly reshaping the entire employment landscape. That force is artificial intelligence. Companies are no longer just, theorizing about AI's potential. They're now openly citing AI as the primary, explicit reason for significant workforce reductions. And this trend is accelerating at an alarming rate.
What's truly revealing here is how forthright companies are becoming about their AI-driven workforce transformations. Take IBM, for instance. They recently announced firing 8,000 people, with a significant majority of those cuts happening directly in HR departments. They're replacing human employees with sophisticated AI agents. These AI systems are now handling tasks like initial candidate screening, scheduling interviews, managing onboarding paperwork, even answering routine employee queries. Tasks traditionally done by human HR generalists. Some estimates suggest that IBM may have laid off an astonishing 20,000 to 21,000 employees over the past 12 months, largely due to this extensive AI integration. This isn't just about making processes more efficient, it's about a fundamental restructuring of their entire operational model.
That's a huge number for one company.
Yeah.
And it directly points to AI replacing functions that, were thought to be uniquely human-centric, like HR.
Precisely. And it's not an isolated incident. Microsoft, a behemoth and certainly a big pioneer of AI, laid off 6,000 people. They openly cited AI's increasing ability to write a third of their internal code. A third. This led to significant cuts in roles that were traditionally considered bread and butter positions in the tech world. Coders, programmers, computer science roles, these were jobs once thought resilient, even during recessions. but AI is rapidly automating segments of their core functions. We've also seen mass Xbox layoffs targeting 4% of their gaming division, the stated goal, removing layers of management to increase agility and effectiveness. That translates to fewer human decision makers, streamlined processes, and ultimately fewer jobs for humans.
And it's not just the tech giants cutting existing jobs. We're also seeing shifts in hiring, right?
Yeah.
Salesforce, for example, a company that's still growing, has actually halted hiring for software engineers. They explicitly stated that AI is so good, it's changing their fundamental workforce need. Their sales force is now primarily focused on pushing AI products to clients. It reflects this internal shift away from human-led software development. And beyond the tech sector, industries are rapidly following suit. Hyatt quietly cut nearly 30% of its U.S. customer service staff implementing AI-driven virtual assistants. Bumble, the dating app, replaced many of its human content moderators and customer support employees with AI agents. It shows how even relatively nuanced human interaction can be automated.
And in a truly stark, almost cautionary tale of AI's disruptive power, consider the company Chegg, an educational technology provider. AI effectively bankrupted the company, turned it into a penny stock. Their business model relied on students paying for step-by-step solutions to homework problems. When large language models like ChatGPT emerged, offering those same solutions for free,
All right.
yeah, the demand for Chegg's paid service just plummeted. This isn't some theoretical future. These are real-world, current examples of AI directly causing massive job displacement and even rendering entire business models obsolete across diverse sectors. It's a rapid, profound reordering of the economic landscape.
And it's crucial to understand that this isn't just about the current generation of chatbots or the simple automation we're seeing today. Experts describe a rapid, almost exponential evolution of AI that will further accelerate job displacement, leading to what some astute observers call a ketchup bottle effect.
That's a great analogy.
Right. A slow initial trickle of impact,
Yeah.
followed by a sudden massive gush.
That analogy perfectly captures the trajectory. The next generation of AI is far more sophisticated. It includes what are termed computer-using agents. These aren't just chatbots. They're fully autonomous AI systems with the ability to access the internet, use various digital tools, and even interact with financial systems like bank accounts. Think of them as digital employees capable of performing complex tasks from start to finish. From researching and writing reports to managing projects and executing transactions, commercial versions are already emerging, taking AI autonomy to a whole new level, far beyond just answering a query.
So we're talking about AI that can actually do things, not just generate text or answer questions.
Yeah, precisely. And following that, we have the, well, probably inevitable rise of humanoid robots. These will take this advanced AI autonomy and intelligence into the physical world, integrating AI into labor that was previously exclusively human. Imagine robots capable of complex manual tasks in manufacturing, logistics, retail, elder care, maybe even hospitality, with levels of precision and endurance humans just can't match. The impact trajectory here is predicted to be incredibly swift and disruptive. Experts anticipate an initial wave of AI automation impacting cognitive tasks, followed perhaps by a 5-year delayed wave of humanoid robot automation impacting physical labor. The core concern, as repeatedly emphasized by these experts, is that this development is expected to happen too soon for people to be able to adjust to these massive compounding shifts.
So humans won't have enough time to adapt their skills or find new roles before the next wave hits. That's the fear.
Exactly. The underlying goal for companies like Amazon, and really across the entire corporate landscape, is this relentless pursuit to get the most done with the least amount of resources required. It's not a moral judgment. It's a fundamental economic imperative in a competitive market, right? This explicit drive towards extreme efficiency is leading to a new economy structured around robots and artificial intelligence. It means human labor, especially in predictable or repetitive tasks, is increasingly viewed as an unnecessary cost center rather than an asset.
What this means for the workforce, then, is a profound and fundamental shift in the very nature of valuable work. Generic skills, those broadly applicable competencies that once offered some measure of job security, they're just no longer sufficient. Not enough to secure employment or even maintain a position. The landscape of what it means to be a skilled worker is being radically redefined as we speak.
Absolutely. Workers now urgently need to identify and develop highly specialized niche skills that employers or competitors currently lack. And this goes beyond just being tech savvy. It absolutely includes a deep practical proficiency with AI tools themselves, understanding not just how to use them, but how to leverage them strategically to achieve unique outcomes. The days of what some engineers dismissively call vibe coding, just copy-pasting code generated by chatbots without truly understanding the underlying logic or being able to troubleshoot it or integrate it effectively, those days are rapidly coming to an end.
So it's not about just being an AI operator, like pushing buttons, but truly being a master of your craft, using AI as an advanced tool within that craft.
Precisely. True engineers, and really true professionals in any field, need solid fundamentals, a deep understanding of systems, rigorous security protocols, intricate design patterns, robust debugging capabilities. They need to understand how things work under the hood, how to build resilient systems, how to identify and solve complex problems that AI can't yet tackle autonomously. They need to understand the limitations and biases of AI too, not just its capabilities. This isn't just a suggestion for career advancement, it's becoming a critical imperative for job security.
Indeed. We're talking about a rapid and unavoidable transition expected in the next, 24 months. A shift that many experts are comparing in scale and impact to the rise of personal computers in the 80s or the internet in the mid to late 90s. Closing the learning curve for these AI tools and truly understanding their profound implications for your field is no longer optional, is it? It's crucial for anyone looking to maintain job security and actually thrive in this rapidly evolving landscape. The future, as they say, profoundly belongs to those who show up, level up, and relentlessly keep building.
Okay, so beyond the direct accelerating impact of automation, the U.S. economy faces these significant and compounding headwinds that are intensifying the crisis. And this is primarily driven by a struggling and frankly increasingly exhausted consumer base. Retail, for example, is serving as that particularly stark canary in the coal mine for the wider economy. Given that consumer spending accounts for a massive 70% of U.S. GDP, that drastic 274% increase in retail job cuts, 75,820 jobs from January to May alone, it's not just a statistical anomaly. It is a direct red flag for the entire U.S. economy.
So these numbers in retail really do mean consumers are just out of money or getting it there.
They signal that consumers are tapped out, both from their savings, which, were boosted during the pandemic but have largely been depleted now, and from their credit. Credit card debt is hitting record highs, and interest rates make borrowing increasingly unsustainable. This lack of consumer purchasing power is evident across the board. We're seeing major retailers, once stalwarts of American commerce like JCPenney, Forever 21, Macy's, Walgreens, Joan Fabrics, Party City, even Red Lobster closing stores at an alarming rate.
Yeah, you hear about those all the time now.
Exactly. This isn't just normal brand turnover. It's a systemic concern revealing a deep contraction in consumer demand. Companies are worried and are looking for places to slim down because consumers are simply spending less on discretionary items, prioritizing only absolute necessities. So retailers are responding by prioritizing efficiency, which inevitably means fewer human employees and more automation. This directly contributes back to the accelerating job cuts we discussed earlier.
And if consumer spending being tapped out wasn't enough, there's this less obvious, but as you said, deeply impactful factor at play. What's being termed the systemic equity stripping from households, a process that impacts both homeowners and small businesses alike. This isn't some abstract economic theory, is it? It sounds like a direct mechanism that many are calling a form of systemic financial fraud. You're saying central appraisal districts and school districts are overvaluing properties at an astonishing, often unsupportable rate.
That's the argument being made, yes.
And then they use these inflate valuations to collect what's described as fraudulent school district bond debt.
Yeah, let me try to clarify what fraudulent school district bond debt might mean in this context. Imagine this scenario. Your local appraisal district assesses your home at, say, $500,000, even if similar homes in your neighborhood are actually selling for $350,000. This inflated value then serves as the basis for levying taxes. But critically, it also allows the school district to issue massive bonds purportedly for school improvements, but tied to these inflated property values across the entire district. So you, the homeowner, end up paying taxes on a value that doesn't reflect reality, and a portion of those taxes goes to service this new debt. It effectively takes money directly from individuals and small businesses' balance sheets year after year. The quantifiable impact of this, according to some sources, is truly shocking. In the last 5 to 7 years alone, an estimated $21 trillion worth of overvaluation has been committed across properties, with an estimated $450 billion stolen from property owners in 2023 alone through this mechanism.
$450 billion stolen in a single year from property owners. That's an almost unimaginable sum.
It is, and the impact on businesses is equally severe, according to these analyses. Commercial property taxes, already a massive burden, are calculated in a way that has been called profoundly exploitative. This leads to massive expense increases for businesses, often making their operating costs unsustainable. This forces them to either close down entirely or pass those prohibitive costs onto consumers through higher prices or onto renters through increased rent. And this directly affects the foundational community businesses, the local hardware store, the family restaurant, the neighborhood salon, that are so vital to local economies and community cohesion. The tragic result being reported is that over 37% of U.S. household owners cannot afford their homes based on their current incomes and expenses, with thousands losing them monthly due to these unsustainable tax loans. It's described as a slow but systemic bleed that directly impacts individual financial stability and community vitality.
And compounding these already immense issues is the precarious federal government's fiscal situation. The national debt stands at a truly staggering $36.2 trillion. The sheer scale of this debt means the U.S. government is now spending approximately $2.6 billion daily, just on interest payments on the national debt.
Right. And to put that figure in perspective, $2.6 billion per day on interest payments is now reportedly more than the entire military budget.
Wow.
Yeah. This is an enormous, non-productive drain on national resources, funds that could otherwise be invested in infrastructure, education, or other areas that support the populace. And this astronomical federal spending has direct, tangible, and deeply painful impacts on ordinary Americans. What's striking here is how this national financial burden translates directly into higher interest rates for citizens across the board. We're seeing 7% mortgages that price out potential homeowners. Credit card APRs hovering between 20–25% that trap consumers in a spiral of debt, and rapidly rising car loan and insurance costs that make even basic transportation feel like a luxury. Companies, in turn, aren't expanding or are even contracting because loans are prohibitively expensive in this high-interest environment, which directly contributes to the already terrible job market we're experiencing. The government's inability to balance its own books is quite literally pushing the burden onto the populace, making daily life increasingly untenable.
Exactly. For millions of Americans, daily life has become less about comfort or even moderate prosperity, and more about a desperate struggle for mere survival. The costs aren't just increasing, they're skyrocketing across every essential category. Average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is now around $1,500 per month nationally, and in major metropolitan areas, it's more than double that, sometimes consuming over half of a household's income. Grocery prices have surged by a painful 20–30% since 2020. And what's particularly frustrating is that these prices, unlike in historical inflation cycles, have gone up and simply have not come back down, even as general inflation might ease.
It's not just inflation in the traditional sense. It's an accumulation of elevated prices. A new, permanently higher baseline seems to be setting in.
Precisely. Childcare for many families is now effectively a second rent, costing more than in-state college tuition in some areas. It makes it nearly impossible for many parents to work full-time without crippling their finances. Even for those with health insurance, the average deductible is over $2,000. Leaving millions just one significant medical issue away from being financially buried by out-of-pocket expenses. This isn't just about economic discomfort. It's an accumulation of elevated stubborn prices combined with softening household incomes. It makes the act of simply surviving, let alone thriving, feel like doing the impossible for a growing segment of the population.
And as millions struggle just to survive, facing this unprecedented financial strain, it's crucial to recognize that the very nature of money itself is undergoing a silent but profound transformation. This underlying shift towards a cashless society isn't just about convenience. It introduces new layers of control and vulnerability that could further intensify the crisis for a struggling populace, especially as these economic pressures mount. Governments are increasingly banning large cash transactions, like anything over $10,000 in Canada, citing money laundering as the primary reason.
But the argument often made is that large-scale money laundering typically occurs through other, more sophisticated means, right? Not usually bags of cash.
That's a critical point. While money laundering is a legitimate concern, it's widely noted that actual large-scale money laundering often occurs through more complex channels, like real estate transactions, shell corporations, international financial networks, rather than suitcases full of cash. Meanwhile, banks benefit enormously from fees on every digital transaction, a small percentage here, a small percentage there, but it adds up to trillions annually. This creates a powerful, often unspoken incentive for banks and governments to push for a digital-only economy.
And we're seeing real-world examples of this control manifesting as direct limits on cash access. Banks in the UK, for instance, are actively limiting cash withdrawals to amounts like £12,000 per year, which is what, roughly $20,000 Canadian?
Something like that, yeah. And there are even increasing instances of banks refusing cash withdrawals to customers unless they can provide an invoice or some other detailed justification for why they need the cash. This isn't just an inconvenience for the average person. It sets a deeply worrying precedent.
It absolutely does. This gradual erosion of physical cash paves the way for what some observers describe as truly dystopian implications. Think about the potential for social credit scores, much like those implemented in some authoritarian regimes, or even climate scores, which would track individual carbon footprints and consumption habits.
Right.
With a fully digital currency, a government could, theoretically, easily freeze bank accounts, implement expiration dates on money, or simply cut people off from the entire financial system based on criteria entirely outside of traditional criminal activity.
So it's not just about money, it's fundamentally about control.
Exactly. Furthermore, the move towards a completely cashless economy makes a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, seem inevitable to many observers.
A CBDC would allow for complete, granular tracking and control of all transactions, giving governments and central banks unprecedented oversight and even direct power over individual spending. What's often overlooked in this discussion is that physical cash acts as a fundamental constraint on commercial banks. Banks can't simply create cash out of thin air. They have to order it from the central bank, which requires them to have assets or reserves to back it up. Removing cash essentially takes away this critical constraint. It allows banks to operate with far more leverage and potentially makes widespread bank runs harder to initiate, despite claims of buffering loan loss provisions. This fundamentally alters the relationship between individuals and their financial institutions, removing a vital layer of freedom, privacy, and economic self-determination.
Okay, so in this deeply unsettling landscape, widespread job loss, accelerating AI displacement, immense compounding economic strain, Universal Basic Income, or UBI, is increasingly gaining traction as a potential, albeit controversial, solution. For those who follow these discussions, you'll know that UBI is typically defined as a no-strings-attached payment given to every citizen, usually adults, non-minors, non-immigrants universally, at a set, regular amount. Andrew Yang's 2020 presidential campaign, for example, really popularized the idea of a $1,000 per month payment for all adults.
Yeah, and what's particularly compelling to UBI proponents is the historical context they often point to, especially in recent memory. The U.S. government, for instance, spent over $5 trillion on COVID relief stimulus on top of its regular budgetary spending. Proponents of UBI argue that this monumental amount, had it been redirected and structured differently, could have funded $1,000 per month for every working-age American for 2 full years. This serves for them as compelling evidence to dispel the myth that the government doesn't have enough money to implement such a program on a federal scale. Advocates suggest UBI could dramatically cut existing government expenditure by replacing the incredibly complex and administratively costly bureaucracy of traditional welfare systems. They also propose it could revolutionize modern economies by providing a stable consumer base, significantly increasing overall consumer demand and serving as a vital and humane solution to the widespread job displacement we're seeing caused by automation. On the surface, these are incredibly compelling arguments, aren't they? Offering a seemingly straightforward answer to profoundly complex problems.
And it's not just theoretical discussions anymore. While a federal UBI remains a distant prospect due to its scale and political hurdles, cities and mayors across the country are already actively implementing their own pilot guaranteed income programs, essentially acting as real-world laboratories for UBI.
It's a localized, urgent response to a crisis already at their doorsteps. We've seen numerous examples. Los Angeles, where 3,000 families are getting $1,000 a month for a year with absolutely no strings attached. Similar initiatives are popping up in New York, Chicago, Columbus, Atlanta, all tailored to their specific local needs. Denver has a program giving $500 a month to the homeless population. Jackson, Mississippi even has initiatives targeting specific vulnerable groups like expectant mothers, recognizing the critical need for early childhood support. The why behind these local efforts is profound and really illuminates the failures of the existing system. Mayors are acting because traditional welfare systems have holes big enough to fall straight through, leaving countless citizens unsupported. We're talking about situations where emergency SNAP benefits have expired, rental assistance programs have dried up, and medical aid programs often limit people's savings, effectively punishing them for trying to build even a small financial safety net. These mayors are pragmatically cutting through bureaucracy and just giving direct cash, recognizing, quite rightly, that the old system was not built for the cost of living in 2025, let alone the challenges of 2029 or 2036.
And the initial results from these local experiments, they have shown some genuinely promising signs of success, haven't they? In places like LA, Jackson, Chicago, data consistently shows people are using the money for essential, life-sustaining needs. Prioritizing rent to avoid eviction, buying nutritious food, securing vital childcare so parents can work or seek jobs, covering urgent healthcare costs.
Yeah, it consistently provides that much-needed breathing room. It allows families to stabilize and make choices that improve their well-being. These programs are demonstrating that recipients are not lazy, they're just exhausted by the relentless struggle to make ends meet in an increasingly unaffordable and volatile economy. It highlights that direct, unconditional cash payments without the labyrinthine bureaucracy and stigmatization of traditional welfare can indeed effectively address immediate survival needs and improve quality of life.
However,
Yeah.
and this is a big however, despite its apparent appeal, the compelling arguments of its proponents and these initial localized successes, UBI, as it's currently conceived and discussed at a national level, faces significant, arguably insurmountable challenges. Challenges that fundamentally undermine its long-term viability as a comprehensive systemic solution.
Yeah, let's get into those flaws.
Okay, one of the most glaring and immediate issues when we talk about a nationwide UBI is just the massive cost and the enormous unprecedented funding gap it would create. Giving just $1,000 a month to all eligible adult Americans using Andrew Yang's proposal as a benchmark would cost at least $2.5 trillion annually. Annually. To put that into sobering perspective, the U.S. currently spends approximately $0.5 trillion on all traditional welfare programs combined. So we're talking about quintupling current welfare expenditure. Even if we were to completely eliminate all existing welfare administration estimated around $100 billion, it wouldn't even begin to offset the additional $2 trillion needed to fund a UBI.
Right.
This immense funding gap, therefore, would require raising vastly more taxes, particularly on higher income earners, large corporations, and capital gains.
That's a critical point. Proposals to fund this often include raising the top marginal tax rates to 70% for incomes over $10 million a year, or taxing capital gains like regular income, which would mean a 37% rate instead of the current 15%. This creates a huge, almost insurmountable budget deficit that is simply impossible to fit into the current U.S. federal budget, which already runs a nearly $2 trillion deficit annually. The fiscal math just doesn't add up without revolutionary changes in tax policy and economic structure that seem politically improbable, at least in the near term.
And even if somehow funded, is $1,000 a month truly adequate to solve the deep economic problems we've outlined? For most people, in most places.
Probably not. You're absolutely right. The proposed $1,000 per month is already below the poverty line for a single-person household, with no additional income based on federal guidelines. It becomes extremely inadequate for individuals with disabilities who face higher living costs, for those with dependent children where costs multiply rapidly, or for anyone living in high cost of living areas like major cities where rent alone can consume that entire amount, if not more, easily. A family trying to get by on $24,000 a year derived from 2 adults each receiving UBI would find it very, very difficult to get by, let alone escape poverty or build any kind of financial security. This suggests that while it might provide a temporary safety net, it's far from a sustainable living wage or a pathway to prosperity in much of the country. It simply kicks the can down the road, really. It doesn't provide an actual long-term solution.
Furthermore, injecting such vast sums of money into the economy, even if theoretically offset by higher taxes, would almost certainly cause strong upwards pressure on consumer prices, leading inevitably to significant demand pull inflation. The argument that tax increases on the wealthy would fully offset UBI expenditures, thereby preventing inflation, seems economically flawed in practice.
Indeed. While wealthy households might minimally reduce their spending due to higher taxes, the crucial distinction is that lower-income households, who would see a significant net increase in disposable income from UBI, would massively increase their spending, especially on necessities like food, housing, transportation.
Why, they'd spend it immediately.
Immediately. This immediate widespread surge in demand from the broad consumer base, without a corresponding increase in supply, would inevitably lead to rapid price hikes across the board, eroding the very purchasing power UBI is meant to provide. Landlords would raise rents, grocery stores would raise food prices, manufacturers would increase costs for goods, effectively capturing a significant portion of the UBI funds, making it more like a transfer payment from the state to existing market players rather than a boost for individuals.
This also leads to a more insidious and concerning flaw: the potential for UBI to lead to the erosion of existing welfare and social services. UBI is often proposed, sometimes explicitly, as a replacement for supposedly bulky bureaucratic social programs. The underlying argument from some proponents, especially those perhaps from a more economically conservative stance, is if you're getting free money, why would you need universal health care, food stamps, decent public transportation, or unemployment benefits?
And this is a truly dangerous proposition, isn't it? It risks destroying social programs as a dedicated goal of the ruling class, of responsibility for well-being from a collective social safety net, which ideally provides targeted support and public goods to individual cash management. While direct cash can be empowering, dismantling these vital services could leave the most vulnerable segments of society even more exposed, especially for those with complex needs that a simple cash payment cannot address, like chronic illness or severe disability. It feels like a dismantling of collective responsibility in favor of individual struggle.
And the market system itself is perfectly positioned to exploit this. As you noted, nothing, absolutely nothing, stops landlords, manufacturers, and lenders from increasing prices to meet the sudden influx of several hundred in people's pockets. Rent, as we've seen with the affordability crisis, is notoriously known for this. Landlords are often quick to raise prices to capture a significant portion, if not all, of the UBI check, effectively siphoning off the intended benefit and turning it into a subsidy for their own profits.
Yeah.
Loans could also see increased interest rates. Basic goods could become more expensive, further negating the positive impact of UBI and trapping recipients in a cycle of rising costs. This turns UBI from a potential lifeline into essentially a subsidy for existing market inefficiencies and exploitative practices, doing little to address the root causes of unaffordability.
This also raises the, let's say, uncomfortable question of the insidious motives of some prominent UBI proponents. When billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk advocate so vociferously for UBI, while simultaneously investing heavily in the AI technologies that are displacing human labor, it creates a powerful paradox. They're often aligned with the idea of cutting bulky bureaucratic social programs in favor of UBI. This alignment suggests that perhaps they aren't looking out for your interests as much as they are looking to streamline systems in a way that primarily benefits capital over labor, especially as automation reduces the need for large human workforces. The argument is that UBI could serve as a mechanism to manage social unrest and maintain consumer demand in a post-work economy, while simultaneously allowing for the dismantling of more comprehensive and expensive social safety nets. It's a complex motive to unpack.
There's also the classic counter-argument of disincentive to work and, crucially, capital flight. While the idea that any form of taxation will automatically stifle all entrepreneurial spirit might be an overblown caricature.
Maybe a little.
A more fair argument, perhaps, is that exceptionally wealthy individuals, those with significant means and global mobility, could indeed choose to leave the country to avoid significantly higher taxes, especially if marginal tax rates climb to 70% or higher.
And this phenomenon has become particularly relevant with the rapid rise of remote work and digital nomadism, hasn't it? Many highly paid individuals, particularly in tech or finance, no longer need to be physically tied to a specific location to earn their income. If enough wealthy taxpayers, particularly those contributing the largest share of taxes, decide to expatriate, it could ironically lead to lower net tax revenues despite the higher rate. This would tragically undermine the very funding mechanism intended for UBI, creating a vicious cycle where the attempt to fund a solution actually exacerbates the problem by shrinking the tax base. It highlights the complex global dynamics at play.
And a critical concern, if we connect this back to the broader social fabric, is that UBI could inadvertently lead to what psychologists term learned helplessness among recipients. This is a state where individuals, despite maybe having opportunities to improve their situation, come to believe they have no control over their environment, leading to passivity and resignation. It could also, perhaps more dangerously, foster significant resentment from those who are still working, paying substantial taxes, maybe struggling themselves, towards those perceived as absorbing value just to live, without contributing in traditional labor terms.
This social dynamic, unfortunately, could trigger a quest to reduce that line item on the balance sheet of government expenditures, leading to political pressure to cut UBI or make it conditional. And in the darkest corners of history, this kind of societal resentment, when left unchecked, has even led to the ugly reemergence of the concept of useless eaters, a dehumanizing term with catastrophic implications for marginalized populations. It fundamentally challenges the core social contract around work, contribution, and individual worth in ways that could be profoundly destabilizing.
And despite all the discussions, the local experiments, and the looming economic and technological shifts, experts like David Shapiro, who deeply study this space, believe UBI is not remotely feasible anytime soon on a federal scale. He asserts it's not happening in the next 5 to 10 years, primarily due to the immense budget gap it would create and the political will simply not being there to bridge it.
Right. And furthermore, the reality is that not all jobs will be automated away within that short time frame, meaning a universal handout might be premature or misdirected for a significant portion of the population. A comprehensive federal solution, according to these experts, is still far off, perhaps 30 to 50 years away, when automation truly reaches a more ubiquitous and fully self-sustaining level. This means that for the immediate and accelerating job crisis and economic pressures we're facing right now, UBI, in its currently proposed form, simply isn't a realistic or imminent solution. It's a discussion for a future crisis, not the one already at our doorstep.
Which raises a truly fundamental question then. When we weave together these rapidly fraying threads, the job destruction by AI, the deep, pervasive economic turmoil we've detailed, and the inherent flaws and stark political unlikelihood of UBI in the immediate future, a deeply concerning and increasingly vivid picture emerges. It's not just a collection of problems, it's a confluence of pressures leading to potentially unprecedented societal stress.
Indeed. Experts are increasingly anticipating turbulent years ahead, roughly from 2029 to 2036, they suggest. This is a period where society will still be desperately adjusting to the massive change that especially AI, but to some extent robotics, will bring. The profound concern is that many people may not be able to pivot to even better roles as the pace of technological change dramatically outstrips their ability to adapt, reskill, or find new, valuable niches. We're talking about a significant portion of the population being effectively sidelined, not just for a few months, but perhaps indefinitely.
And the devastating combination of mass unemployment and underemployment, the increasing unaffordability of daily life for basic necessities, and a social safety net that is either failing or being deliberately eroded. It means citizens are being pushed to find their own, often desperate solutions.
Exactly. This includes a growing trend of internal migration, with people moving to cheaper areas. We're seeing a significant uptick in people seeking homes for less than $100,000 in more affordable markets, often far from their existing support systems. It also forces a widespread return to multi-generational households out of sheer necessity. Adult children moving back in with parents or vice versa, simply to share financial burdens. Even friendships and social relationships can be profoundly strained by unemployment, as financial disparities and the emotional toll of job loss create fissures in social dynamics.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit scary. If a supposed meritocracy, our societal system, doesn't account for those who lose, if the system doesn't provide a viable, dignified path for a significant portion of the population that finds itself without meaningful work or economic security due to these macro shifts, then a large number of people don't have an investment in keeping that system running.
Logically, yeah.
They will, quite logically, want to overturn it. They will begin to perceive the vast fortunes created by this new AI-driven paradigm as illegitimate or parasitic, built on the backs of displaced labor and societal inequity. And this isn't necessarily pointing towards a sudden catastrophic apocalyptic collapse that happens overnight. It's what some describe as a gradual, agonizing death of the thousand cuts financially for the American people, until they are so desperate, so exhausted that they beg for a solution, almost any solution, just to alleviate the suffering.
And the very fact that billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk are discussing UBI isn't framed as a mere possibility anymore, but often as an inevitability. This suggests a recognition at the highest levels that the current economic trajectory is unsustainable for the masses. The affordability crisis will likely continue to grow exponentially, pushing more and more people into increasingly desperate situations where basic survival becomes the absolute primary struggle, eclipsing any hope of upward mobility or even stability. The core dilemma remains. How do societies adapt when the fundamental contract of work and economic stability is broken, and when the proposed solutions like UBI are either insufficient, potentially exploitative in their long-term implications, or simply too distant to prevent immediate and widespread suffering? The current Band-Aid approaches are simply not addressing the acute structural changes that need to be made to prevent a true social and economic unraveling.
So you've seen the intricate web of challenges we've uncovered. A job market fundamentally altered and disrupted by AI at an unprecedented pace, an economy straining under its own immense weight, and a proposed solution in universal basic income that carries both tantalizing promise and profound, deeply unaddressed flaws that threaten to undermine its very purpose.
And this situation raises an immensely important and urgent question for all of us, doesn't it? In a world where the very act of work, the cornerstone of our economic and social identity, is being fundamentally redefined, and traditional safety nets are visibly failing, what truly constitutes a sustainable, humane path forward for society? How do we secure human well-being and societal stability when the old economic playbooks no longer work, and the new ones seem either out of reach or alarmingly problematic in their own right? It's a challenge that demands not just answers, but maybe a profound reevaluation of our values and our systems.
We hope this deep dive has given you much to consider as you navigate this rapidly changing world. If you found this discussion valuable, please like, subscribe, and perhaps consider donating on our GoFundMe page. Your support helps us continue these vital explorations.